All right, this is a review of the Justice for Life model. And the goal here is to create a framework for understanding the human condition, which is related to our sense of justice and injustice, which is the starting point. The numbers there are intended to help remember the place in the model, 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, and you. So let's jump in. We're going to go over the vision first, two errors, three levels, four domains, 12 messages, and one you. So that's the numerical structure of the model, and then also just the order of the presentation right now. All right, so vision. We're going to jump right into this idea of the human condition, that all the characteristics and events that compose the essentials of human existence. So it's basically an attempt to describe our our situation. And part of the human condition is this um, duality between survival, the idea that we are animals trying to get by, and a lot of our problems have to do with the way we treat each other like animals, and then the other side of our condition, which is being conscious and having an awareness that those behaviors are no longer needed. And so this comprises the human condition as it's described by most religions and spirituality, that there are two kind of sides to us. So I'm going to frame this differently. I'm going to talk about um, the vision, which is really about injustice. So the idea of the vision, the one vector, is a direction. So the vector is a point, as mathematically speaking, is a point, and a line and a direction kind of away. So the point here is represented by the idea of injustice. So as we looked back at that last screen and seeing survival on the left, um, the idea here is that it's okay to need to survive. We're not judging the need to survive, and all of our behaviors that comprise our survival natures are normal. They're part of being a human being. But injustice is when we are using those survival behaviors in situations that don't require survival. So this is how we end up identifying injustices in the world, is that we have been wronged, we have been treated in a way that you would be treated if it was a life-threatening situation, but it was not actually a life-threatening situation. Um, so um, there's a lot of examples we can use for that, but I'm not going to do examples right now. Okay, so the idea here is that it's a vector. So wherever we see injustice, what we try and do is move away from it. We try and figure out a way to move beyond the injustice. And the in this sense, the opposite of injustice is not justice. It is hope. It's better described as hope. I would say justice and hope are similar concepts that, but but justice infers that there can be made right, things can be made right, and in most cases, injustices can never be made right. They're just harm caused. So hope is the idea that we are moving away from that, and we're learning from it, and we're changing with consideration of what has happened. Justice is an idea of like making things right. So that's why I use the word hope instead of justice. So injustice is the first part of the model, and it's the starting point, and it's this question: do you see injustice? Do you see injustice? Do you see injustice in your life? Do you see injustice in the world around you? If you say yes to that, then that's the starting place for this model. So now, where do you go from there? Well, we're going to move into the second part of the model, which is the source of injustice. So, if we were talking about Buddhism, we would be talking about the four noble truths, which is the source of suffering. If we were in Christianity, we'd be talking about the fall of Adam and Eve. There are a lot of different ways of describing why we have the problems that we deal with today. So this is mine. So I'm going to start with this concept of yin and yang, which is two halves of a whole, and the idea is these two halves is that they need each other. They're both part of the same whole. So I have an interesting take on this. So just covering what yin and yang is. Yin is the dark. It represents the inside of things. It represents the hidden pieces. And it's also represents the reactive natures of things. And then on the other side, we've got yang. That's the outside of things. It's the openness, and it's the activating. It's the active, moving, doing, the hot, burning, like destructive, kind of creative side of things. Okay, so we've got yin and yang. Now, this is what's described in Chinese philosophy, is that it's a concept of dualism, um, describing how seemingly opposite or contrary forces may actually be complementary. So interconnected, interdependent in a natural world, and how they may give rise to each other as they interrelate to one another. So this is, it makes sense for like inside and outside, that those two concepts, you can't have an outside all by itself. There must also be an inside that accompanies the outside. So in all senses of yin and yang, when you identify one component on one side, there has to be a component on the other side. So this is a observation of pretty much everything in life. Like we can use this, and we can see this manifest in all different ways of how we see objects. It even goes into mathematics and quantum mechanics, and there's implications everywhere. So this duality is a fact of life. So here's how we get into the model. Two perceptions of errors creating injustice. So these are perception errors. So the idea of perception errors is kind of derived from this yin and yang. So and what I'm doing here is translating the yin and yang into two expressions of consciousness. So the yin side is our survival nature, on the left-hand side, our survival nature, and the yang side is our conscious nature. So the survival nature is like on the inside. You could picture it being on the inside of your body. It's the consciousness in your body that is aware of the feelings and aware of the physical parts of it. It's reactive. It moves. It feels pain. It feels fear. And then the outside is our conscious nature. That's the outside consciousness. And that's where we are feeling disembodied. That's where we feel like we are something other than our bodies, that where there's like this greaterness and wholeness and outsideness. So these are two aspects of the consciousness that is residing for the most part in our brains, but our whole bodies. So the part of that relates to the model is that both of these conscious forces create injustice in their own unique way, and they interrelate to each other. So one way to describe this is mathematically, in science, when we're conducting experiments and we create a theory about the world, a theory about our experiment. Then we run the experiment, and then we have a result. Now, if a type 1 problem is when we have accepted a false outcome. So the outcome of the experiment we think confirms what we thought was true, but in reality we were wrong. We made a perception error, and so we have essentially overreacted. We have like thought that something was happening that was not actually happening. So the Chicken Little story of the skies falling is a good narrative to describe this. Is that you have Chicken Little who like he notices something happening and he overreacts to it, and he thinks that it means the whole sky is falling, and so he tells everybody that the sky is falling. So he thinks that something is going. His narrative is that yes, indeed, the sky is falling. The theory about the world is the sky is falling. In reality, it's not falling. So he has a perception error about reality. So he's operating in this perception error. He's behaving in this perception error. So that's the survival nature creating injustice. And it's injustice for him because he's disconnected from reality, and he's causing problems for everybody. Everyone's getting super annoyed with him, which leads us to the other side, which is the conscious nature's contribution to injustice, and that is ignoring problems. So this in the scientific model is have a um, when you have a rejection of a true model. So it's when you run the experiment and the outcome you think is not accurate, is not right, when in fact it has actually done what it was supposed to do. So it's kind of like passing over something. It's kind of like missing a detail. So the conscious nature is when we are elevated out of our bodies and we're thinking more broadly. We tend to see things in systems and complexities, and so we miss details. So this is expressed in this idea of you're overreacting, which is this idea that is telling someone you're not having a problem, you're not experiencing an injustice. And of course, that is not a helpful thing to tell anybody, because you are actually expressing the other side of their of their injustice, and you're creating more problems. So in the conscious nature, we're aware that other people overreact. We're aware that other people create problems, and so we tend to ignore those problems. So this is where we get systemic injustices. This is where our racism and classism and all this come from, is this conscious ignoring of problems, and it's extremely complex. So we have these two things: we ignore problems and we overreact to problems, and these are perception errors where we think we know reality. Reality is actually different. And because other people are assessing reality as well, and we have this shared reality that we all operate in, these two, it creates injustices. So, of course, all of this relates to humans interacting with humans. This is all about us interacting with each other. So, the perception errors are all about our human perception of reality. And so, when I say shared reality, I'm talking about what most humans would agree is reality. All right, and then we can also see how they relate to each other. These problems relate to each other, um, and so let's move on now. Okay, now let's move on to the three levels. So we started with this vision of hope away from injustice. It's our goal, our direction that we're trying to go. We've assessed the problems, the things that create this injustice. And so now we're going to extend into levels. So now this is where it gets complex, because we've basically got three levels of depth, and these are ascending levels of depth. So we're starting at the basic level at the bottom there, very basic emotions, biases, behaviors. This goes right back to where we started with injustice. You could even think of it as the first set of problems there, where we're overreacting to things. We're in our bodies, that conscious awareness that we have in our bodies. And then we expanded outward into that conscious awareness, which is that understanding level. We added perception to that we can perceive reality, and we could be wrong about our perceptions of reality. So that's a level up. So that's where we are assessing systems and resources. We're exercising judgment. This is a second level of thinking. So now in step two before, we were basically had two different derivatives. So now we're adding a third derivative above this. So this is the highest level of depth, and that is the lifestyle level. So here we're adding time to the model. Last time we added perception, now we're adding time to the model. So we understand that humans have these problems of creating injustice through these different levels of conscious, two different operating conscious forces. Now we're seeing that this happens over the course of our whole lives, and everybody has this happening over the course of their whole lives. So now this is where we get philosophy and religion and morals from, because we realize we need some kind of guidance to help us remember, because we are constantly forgetting that we're making these errors, is the other aspect of this. These perception errors occur because we forget that we make them. Okay, so now we've got these three levels of depth. Model's getting a lot more complex now. You can see this as derivatives, or another way to think about it is emergent behavior. So the properties of a whole system are different than the properties of the individual components of that system. So the more with complexity, we get emergent behavior. So understanding this understanding level is an emergent behavior from our awareness, and lifestyle is an emergent property of understanding of perception. Ooh. Okay, so 3 levels is the most important thing to think about. It's just that we've got these 3 levels of depth, and sometimes we exist mostly in one of these levels, um, and we can get stuck in these levels of thinking without thinking about the other ones. So basically the model is integrating and realizing we need to operate at all 3 of these levels. All 3 of these matter. Okay, yeah, we're going up, we're going down. That's the up and down. We need to basically move between these levels in order to address injustice. Okay, so now we're going to hit the 4 domains. So now what we're doing is the exact same thing we did before. We're integrating all 3 levels before. So we're going to add a 4th level, a 4th emergent property. So what is that? What would you go more than lifestyle? Well, let's think about these like expanding bubbles here. We started with injustice. We expanded our bubble to understand that we are experiencing harm caused to us uh, because of survival behaviors that are not the result of actual survival. We don't need to. We have our survival taken care of, but these behaviors are still existing. Then we expanded out from there, and we saw that we had these perception errors that are happening. That we are not tracking what reality is. We're forgetting that we make mistakes, overreacting to problems, and ignoring problems. Then we expanded out again to this lifestyle. Oops, I missed those. It's a mistake in that model. Obviously, the line should be there in lifestyle. Um, so now we are assessing this over the course of our whole lives and the whole lives of other people. And we could even get into whole civilizations' lives, all human lives for the last 10, 20,000 years. Um, so that's another level of awareness. So now we're going further. And the furthest we can get is life, all of life. So that kind of completes the circle and really what we're talking about is Earth, Gaia, kind of this is part of Gaia theory, that life is a conscious force. We don't know if it exists outside of the Earth. So currently all it matters is we think of all of life being on Earth. That's as far as we need to expand our bubble. Expansion of consciousness is to life on Earth. So what this does is take the first 3 levels, which are all about human relationships and human constructions, and then we're integrating all of life into all of that. So what we're going to do to make this a little more palatable and understanding is construct values out of these. So these are the 4 values that are part of this integrative model. So the first is individuality. That's where our injustice came from. The idea that we are each unique, we are each valuable, that no one should be harmed unnecessarily. So individuality is the value that comes out of that first component of the model. The second is wisdom. So that's the idea of perception, perceiving reality, and arriving on what a shared reality looks like, what true reality looks like. So this is what wisdom gets us. And then community is the 3rd level. That's the idea of a whole lifestyle that we need to teach each other, we need to guide each other, and we need to be part of working together, collaborating, networking. That's all a part of we're a human community, one giant unified human community. So that's that lifestyle level of thinking. So that's going to be the 3rd value. And then the 4th value is change. So this is, of course, where it gets extremely complex. Life is a changing model. 98% of all life that has existed has died. You know, it's a churning mess of creating new things, destroying things. So change ends up being the value that we're trying to integrate into our lives, is the acceptance of change, the abilities we have to change ourselves. So that is how we integrate life into this whole model. So returning back to the application of this 4 domains of value is these are the 4 universal values of all humanity, of yourself and us: individuality, wisdom, community, and change. And so we can also take these one step further into integrate justice, the idea of justice into this. And that's where we take these 12 messages. So what we're going to do now is construct 12 messages that each message will take different component models and walk us through a pathway from injustice to justice. All right, so that's the 12 messages here. So we're going to start down here in the bottom left. Core problem is injustice. We're going to move, this is insecurity is what I should put there. And this part of the model needs to be firmed up. But what we're going to do is start down here in the bottom left. We're going to move. We've basically done the first four aspects of the model already at the bottom, and then we're going to. This is at the awareness level. So we're becoming aware of injustice. Message 2 is we're becoming aware of the errors, the way we create it. So we come from ignorance. We're ignorant about how we're creating this injustice. We see ignorance in people around us and how they create injustice. And then there's an intolerance in the third level. The 3 levels of depth is we have problems with not tolerating other people, not tolerating the diversity of humanity, that ultimately the idea of community is that we are all one humanity, and all the behaviors are need to be tolerated if we're going to be able to live together. And so that ends up becoming an important part of the 3 depths. And then the 4 domains, that's an awareness level of how essentially focusing on only one of the domains is also creating injustice. If you only care about economics, or if you only care about politics and you don't integrate the other 3 domains, you're creating injustice. So that's that inaction aspect of it. So that we need to be active in all 4 domains. So that's the message 4. Message 5 now, we're moving up to the understanding level. So this is where we get the idea of values. We teach values at the understanding level. So individuality is a value, and it starts with this idea that we are all insecure, and so we all need respect. Message 5 is about wisdom. This is the understanding of our economic kind of domain, and that is the application that we are ignorant. We start from ignorance, so we need to have integrity. We need to acknowledge when we are wrong. That's an aspect of integrity. Doing the right thing when no one is looking is an aspect of integrity. So not taking advantage of situations when you're aware of errors that other people are making. So it's just the integration of errors and ignorance into wisdom. And then it's also the kind of the seat of our shared reality is wisdom. And then we've got community is message 6. And in community, we talk about intolerance. And it's interesting that says should be responsibility. That should be intolerance and responsibility, not community. So the lesson there is that we have a responsibility to our communities. That's what we're getting at with that lifestyle level. Understanding the lifestyle level is that we have to restrain our behaviors, and we can't just do anything we want. That we need to have tolerance for others, and we have restraint, so that is a responsibility that we all have. So that's something we teach our kids. It's something we try and teach each other, is to be responsible. And responsibility is always about other people. And then the 8th message is change. That's the value of change. So how do we apply this value of change? That's inaction. Inaction is when we're comfortable. We don't want anything to change. We're fine in our life. We typically don't want anything to change in our lives, even when we're unhappy. So inaction is a part of just like all the other. These are the 4 sources of injustice: insecurity, ignorance, intolerance, and inaction. So we need to get active, and that leads to compassion. So that should not be changed down there. That's inaction and compassion. So the reason that you become active is because you are compassionate. You're compassionate towards yourself. You're compassionate toward other people. So that causes change. All right, so now we're going to move up to the highest level. This is the lifestyle level, and we're going to work through the 4 domains now. So the lifestyle level of individuality, we get to social justice. So we are social for individual reasons. So the idea of being social, I don't associate with community. That is our that is our need for attention, our need for love and for affection, our need for close relationships that influence us. So any relationship in your life that is highly influential to you is more closer to your individuality than to community, which we'll talk about in political justice. So social justice is about individuals and about defending the rights of individuals. And so that's why passivism ends up becoming the lesson in message um, 9. This is message 9. So passivism is the lesson there. And it's as we extract respect, and the emergent behavior of respect over time is passivism. There's never a reason to harm anybody unless you're defending your life. That's kind of where we come from injustice. So that completes the scale of digging through injustice. But we're going to keep going to message 10 now, which is the economic justice message. So again, economy is another way of seeing that we measure things. We measure, like the only way we can understand reality is to measure things, but we know this is just an approximation. Like, those things are not real. So economic justice can be applied in a lot of different domains, but the core message is always going to be philanthropy is sharing, sharing things. So the way that we seek when you have integrity on a regular basis over the course of your life, you're going to become philanthropic, is the result of that. And so philanthropy is the message 10. And then message 11 is political justice. So how do we seek political justice? Now this gets into the idea of broadening community into the idea of all humanity. The biggest sense of community is everybody. So your responsibility to community ends up being you're responsible for all humans. So political justice is an attempt to navigate this like crazy world of humans. And ultimately the best tool is not democracy, it's not Republican or Democrat, it's not anything about those, it's about humanism. So humanism is a choice to see the good in others. So what holds us back in the political realm is vilification and attacking. And so that's us looking at the bad parts of people. And so what we need to do is always look at the good parts of people. And so even when we're dealing with people who say they're enemies, we're looking at their good qualities, and that's going to result in a better outcome. It kind of relates to the passivism, but the humanism is a lesson in message 11 that this is a philosophy that is beneficial over time across around the world, across all of humanity. And so now we're integrating passivism, philanthropy, and humanism, moving into the 4th domain. And the most emergent property here is ecological justice. So here's where we understand that our injustice that we started with has affected our environment, and we're destroying life, and we're not in balance with life. So all of these ideas come into ecological justice, the need for sustainability. And so here the message is veganism. And so this is basically like a big justification for veganism, but it is important because being vegan is integrating your beliefs about passivism, philanthropy, and humanism to all of life, all of conscious life. So that's a way to restrict your behavior or to control your behavior on an individual level every day, extracting that all the way out to a lifestyle, an identity that you hold yourself to, and bring in order to bring about ecological justice. So those are the 12 messages. And obviously each message is super dense and could involve a lot of discussion. So the application of this model is to roll through these 12 messages on a regular basis and then refer back to their model components. The injustice, always starting with injustice. That's the reason we're having this discussion. The 2 problems that there's the two errors end up coming up in all 12 of these messages that give us kind of a sense of where we're coming from and where we're going. The 3 levels of depth, which is these 3 rows here, and then the 4 domains, which is the four like domain columns. All right. So finally, 30-minute video. Geez. Finally, how does this apply to you? So these are the questions for you. 4 questions. First, do you see injustice in the world? I'm assuming you're going to say yes. So we'll just move on to the second one. Just to note that like some people say no to that. That is a worldview problem, a belief system problem. So the rest of this model is not going to make any sense to anybody. The answer is no. Next question, which perception errors do you commit more frequently? Survival thinking errors or conscious thinking errors? So this is an important thing to understand about yourself, that they both happen. Survival thinking errors come out in the form of anxiety, come out in the form of being overreactive to your environment. And then conscious thinking errors are cognitive errors. Thinking, basically the knowingness, thinking you're right. Anytime you think you're right, you're probably committing conscious thinking errors. So what do you commit more frequently? And I say more frequently because everyone commits both of these errors. And then which levels of depth do you avoid? So here's awareness, understanding, and lifestyle. Awareness includes body awareness, awareness of your own body, feeling your own body, feeling your emotions, awareness of your emotions, awareness of feelings. And then the understanding level is thinking about how you think, thinking about how other people think, understanding human behavior. You think about like anthropology, science is in here, education, all of that is part of understanding. It's just like everything you can learn. And then the top level of depth is lifestyle, everything about the identities you choose, the way you navigate your life with patterns and rituals. And so that's a part of lifestyle. So what levels do you avoid? And then which of the 4 domains do you feel most uncomfortable? And most uncomfortable, because there is likely going to be one that you feel most comfortable. And there's likely to be, like, some people are very uncomfortable ecologically. They're not comfortable in nature. They don't sleep well outside. They're scared of bugs, all that. Some people are not comfortable in politics. They don't like the fighting and the anger and the war and all that stuff. They don't understand it all. Other people are comfortable there. So these end up getting into kind of personality types that we fall into. These different domains are domains of human, like, conscious gravity, social, economic, political, and ecological. So just knowing where you're most uncomfortable is likely where you need to focus on, because the goal of this model is to balance all of this, to balance across 4 domains, to balance across levels of depth, to balance across correcting for both errors, and then to see injustice. There's no balance there, I guess, just direction. Okay. Oh, that was a long video. Okay, so we'll discuss the answers to these questions as a way of integrating the model into daily life. Thanks for watching.